My phone's getting pretty old now, so by the evening times it's generally out of battery. And if you're sat on the end of the sofa, there's nowhere to put your drink down. So I built something to take care of both problems. This is my CNC machine. It's a 75 by 75 centimetre killer bee. It's a nice little machine, but little is the key word. The cut area is around 50 centimetres squared, and when you want to build something bigger, that's an issue. In this video, I'm going to build a table that's 80 centimetres long, with a couple of honeycomb inlay sections. With a large enough CNC machine, that's easy. However, I'm going to have to get a bit more creative. To start with, I'll mill up the rough sawn wood and cut a template from some MDF. This is lined up with a piece that will become the top of the table. These bits are cut out with a jigsaw, leaving a few mil shy of the lines, and a bit of double-sided tape attaches the template back on securely. This is a 1/2 inch compression flush trim bit. It's got a couple of bearings at the top that you use to ride along a template and accurately transfer the shape to the piece below. I found the trick with this is not to take off too much with a single pass, but to creep up until the bearings engage. There's less chance of getting tear out this way. Next, it was on to creating the plugs that would fill the holes I just made. A test piece was cut from MDF, which is a good thing, as I got the corner radius completely wrong on the first one. The two plugs for each side were made from the same bit of wood, so they'd match nicely. A couple of passes on the outside were done first, to establish the outline and to add a channel a couple of millimetres wide with a down cut bit. This is a key part of the design. It acts as a shadow line between the plug and the hole to hide anywhere the two edges don't go together seamlessly. Later on, it will be filled up with epoxy. Doing this was not a fast job. I think it took about 5 hours to cut this. I wanted a nice dark piece of wood which would contrast well to form the inlay. I found this old bit of, I think it was a door sill from when we redid the house, so cut it in half and whacked it on the CNC. This was another super long cut. I think it was about 6 hours, so I didn't bother with the dust extraction. I just periodically hoovered up the dust. After trimming off the edges on the bandsaw, the two bits of the inlay can finally be put together. I tried various methods to apply the glue, including shoving my finger in there, but settled on a small paintbrush. It was here I made the first mistake of the project. When clamping the pieces together, I used a board to go on top that was narrower than the two pieces I was trying to glue together. Didn't think this would be an issue at the time. However, after milling off the top to expose the pattern, the edges had a small gap on one side, while there hadn't been enough clamping pressure. So I filled the gaps with glue and sawdust, and then did another very light pass, which helped clean it up quite a bit. A quick test to make sure it all fits, and yeah, that's pretty satisfying. This next cut was a little scary. Even though it was just a simple V-carve to cut in the wireless charging symbol. There was 10 hours of work invested in this piece so far. Anyway, measured, checked multiple times, and thankfully it all went smoothly. A coat of epoxy resin was added to seal any remaining holes and should prevent the black resin from bleeding out. Cutting such a lot of material from the top piece had caused it to warp slightly, so I did several dominoes along the length, so when it was all put together at the bottom it should help pull it straight. So this is the second plug being finished off. I used a much wider board to sandwich it all together this time, so the edges were a lot better. Then it was on to gluing the plugs into place. The first was done from above, but glue was pushed up towards the shadow line and needed cleaning up properly before the plug was sent home for a few bangs against the flat surface. Next one was installed from below instead, which stopped the glue issue. Quick check with a flat edge and top with hole again. Okay, I've got a bit of a dilemma now. I did this test piece which ended up being a little coaster and put this black line around the outside. You can see the epoxy's filled up into the grain a little bit on the outside. So I thought with this one, let's cover the whole lot in epoxy, and then in between these two segments we've got this little shadow line. So when if I put black in, it's not going to bleed out. Obviously all this stuff on the top is going to get sanded off. You can see on the little wireless symbol there, really nice crisp black lines without any bleed out. But I'm thinking if I put black all the way around the outside of this, it might sort of cheapen the piece a little bit on the top. It looks okay on there, but I'm not sure. So what I might do is just go with clear in the channel, and that gives enough of a differentiation between the two bits of wood to make it look intentional without it being too obvious with the black. After the remaining epoxy was sanded off, the top edge was rounded over, and then the top board was more or less done. So I went looking around on the internet trying to find a wireless charger which could charge through, a decent thickness of wood, and stumbled across this one from Master Charge. So reached out to them and they sent me this unit free of charge. It's not a sponsored video or anything, but just for me to have a look at and see how we got on with. So this is their Master Charge Invisible LR unit. It's QI enabled, 10 watts. And it's pretty big, to be honest. It's a lot bigger than other wireless chargers I've seen. This is the same shape as the recess, which is going to be going on my table. So that fits on there, or in there rather, quite nicely. I'm going to be showing the installation of that a bit further on in the video. Okay, next mistake. This is the base of the top piece now. For some reason I forgot about all my plans, and in my head thought the wireless charger looked best on the outer side of the table. So roughly drilled out the holes, and then I remembered the legs needed to go there, so I had to re-drill in the right position. At least I realised before I'd cut the hole in the wrong place. Then it was on to a bit more template routing to clean up the edges. A rabbiting bit was then used to create a ledge on the bottom face, which a cover piece would sit in. The cover was made by milling a piece of wood down to the same thickness as the ledge, and then the CNC machine cut out a shape. The honeycomb pattern was used again to create some holes which would allow some good airflow to the charger that would sit underneath. Small magnets were then glued around the edge to hold it in place. Not bad. The cable for the wireless charger needed a hole to pass through, so this was drilled out. Although there was a bit of a gap between the base piece and the bottom of the plug, a channel was routed in to ensure the cable and the barrel jack connector would have plenty of space. A bit of an angle was added to the bottom of this hole to allow the connector a bit more room to pass through. With a hole drilled and the leg held up to the base piece to mark out the position from the edge, the leg was then marked up for the next step, which was to route in a channel. This would form the inside of the leg and provide a route for the cable to go down. Okay, time for our next stupid mistake. When routing the channel, you can see it goes all the way along to the hole, and then this extra bit of line here, which is probably where I should have drilled the hole to get the dimensions I wanted properly. So now the legs are going to have to go slightly further in than they were meant to, Probably only by a centimetre or so, but it's still really annoying. Time to fix the extra holes I'd made. This was done using a plug cutter bit. They're meant to be using a drill press, but I don't have one, so instead I made a guide piece out of a bit of oak and clamped it down. Well, the first one was a bit rough, but I think the others will be okay. Finally, the top and base could be glued together. The dominoes made the alignment easy when it was all clamps ahead. If you like this video, please consider subscribing. The next day, the base was template routed to the same profile as the top, and then some fine tuning done using a scraper and some sanders. Onto the legs. Steel ruler was arched between some pre-drawn markings, a curve transferred to some MDF. The bandsaw then cut the rough shape, and it was finessed with a belt sander. The legs were designed to be quite chunky, with two boards glued together for each. One side would be straight and would go up against the sofa, and the other one curved. They were all marked up and a rough shape cut on a bandsaw. Hello, old friend. Then for one piece from each leg, the router cut in the final shape. Once dry, the back of the legs were jointed to make sure they're nice and flat. The curve was finished off using the top piece as the template for the bottom one. And then a bit of sanding took care of any marks in the routing. The legs had a couple of flat bits at the top and the bottom of the curves. They were put back through a table saw to make sure all the legs were exactly the same dimensions. When the roundover was added to them, then the shape of them was pretty much done. A stretcher between the legs was put in to prevent any racking from side to side. It was made in exactly the same way as the legs. I cut some test pieces from MDF until I got a really snug fit with the legs. The feet were then cut out using the bits of wood I'd cut out from the top piece at the start. The top of the table was designed to cantilever over the back of the sofa, so to make sure it didn't fall over, the feet were made extra long. The legs were designed to be tenons to go into the mortises on the feet. This should be a really strong fit. The leg which had the cable running down it needed one more cut to create a channel for the cable to get out the bottom of the foot. The legs were then clamped together and put through the table saw to cut them down to final length. Believe it or not, the dust extractor is turned on at this point, it's just not powerful enough. More dominoes were put in to attach the legs to the stretcher. Figure 8 fasteners would be used to attach the legs to the top. Holes were countersunk for the fasteners to sit in and then pre-drilled for the screws. The legs and stretcher were then assembled and held in place at the base of the table, so the holes could then be marked out for the position of where holes for threaded inserts would be required. That's all the pieces made now, so I'm going to wipe them down with some white spirit to prepare them for finish. If you leave Rubio monocoat for too long, it can form this jelly-like film on the top, so I'd get a Stanley knife and stab the top, and I could put a syringe through to suck it out. Threaded inserts were then put in. I ended up using a bit of 5-minute epoxy because they're a little bit loose just to make sure they're really well bedded in. Then it was time to glue everything together. The feet were glued up first and then the legs put in. I ended up using 1, 2, 3 blocks at the bottom and the top to make sure everything was really square. The legs and the stretcher were glued up, and then the legs were bolted to the base of the table to make sure everything fit. The power cable was also managed at this time. I probably could have done this afterwards by taking the legs back off, but I thought I'd do it now, save us a job later. Okay, so it's time to install a wireless charger. So I'm going to plug it in. And then kind of just hold it in place and use the alignment jig to try and position it accurately. Okay, so I actually struggled to get this aligned for a minute until I realised that the sensor's got to be really flat with the object behind, and then it lines up nicely and you get a little ring confirmation. Okay, so that's all secured in position now. Did manage to strip one of the screws, but I think I was just a bit overzealous with the screwing. So with that, it is all complete. Table's finished at last. And now for the final shots.